fireworks for the #1 wide receiver, Dakorien Moore, as he makes Dan Lanning's holiday even more explosive. The 5-star picking the Ducks for his college destination. So with that, let's welcome in our friend Erik Skopil of Duck Territory. An exciting holiday for you. Let's start with just how did the Ducks pull off this massive commitment of Dakorien Moore?
Well, I think let's start with just the state of Texas and the commitment that they've made there, both from a coaching perspective. Obviously, Will Stein came from UTSA. That was a helpful. I think you have to look at Drew Maringer, who worked at Texas for a while. They've had connections to the state, but I think, back in April, they hired a new running backs coach, Rashad Samples, and Samples' name may be familiar in the Duncanville area because his dad Reginald is the head coach at Duncanville High School where Dakorien Moore plays, and so. We kind of flagged that at the time over at duckterritory.com to kind of watch and see this might be a recruitment that takes off for Oregon due to this kind of connections to the state and obviously with the family there. And I think Junior Adams did a great job of closing here, the wide receivers coach. He has a great track record with wide receivers. And Will Stein and his offense, I think, has to be pretty attractive to a young receiver. Had a couple 1,000-yard receivers a year ago. So I think you kind of sum it up and you look at, hey, they had some connections there. Maybe at the high school level, they have great, I think, a great kind of offense to sell. And then the way that this staff kind of recruits and is pretty relentless.
Erik, the Ducks are up to number 5 in the recruiting rankings. They got a lot of momentum right now. You got guys like Jonah Williams, DJ Pickett still left on the board. What is it that Dan Lanning is doing right now that is so clearly different than what was done in the past that has the Ducks in position to really kind of battle it out for a potential #1 class down the line?
Yeah, well, I kind of said it there at the end. This is a relentless recruiting staff. A lot of young recruiters on staff. They've done a really good job, I think, of spreading the wealth in terms of, like, Oregon doesn't have the most attractive geography, and yet you look at this class and they have recruits from Texas. They've got 5-star kids from Florida. They've done a good job in the Midwest where they're now playing from a conference perspective. So I think they've done a good job of recruiting nationally, of keeping a local focus and maintaining the local, talent there and kind of, not allowing too many guys to get away. But I think you look at the way the staff is kind of composed, and there's a lot of grinders on this staff. Dan Lanning was once a grinder as an assistant coach and a defensive coordinator at Georgia, and I think he's been very careful about kind of putting together a staff of guys that kind of fit that MO and that kind of fit what he's doing. So I think that's helped. Obviously, Oregon has a lot to sell. I think Dan has kind of sold the fact that he'll be here for a long time, turning down an opportunity maybe to go to Alabama, some other jobs in the last year. And then we'll bring up the fact that maybe they're pretty competitive with NIL.
Yeah, that video he dropped on Twitter after saying that he was staying in Eugene and the color of the grass is pretty darn green, that would have sold me as a commit for sure. And it's not just Moore, too. I mean, you don't get to be a top 5 class without a lot of good pieces behind him. So tell us a little bit more about some of the other big commitments that you've seen for Oregon this summer.
Yeah, they had a great final weekend there in June. I think June 21st, 17 official visitors, about half a dozen 5-stars, more committed. But before that, it kind of got started about 2 weeks ago. Brandon Finney, a 4-star defensive back, was on campus in that June 21st visit weekend, and he popped kind of unexpectedly. I think a lot of people thought he'd stay out maybe at Penn State, somewhere east. That kind of got the momentum. And then June 28th, June 29th, they picked up a pair of commits each of those days. Josiah Sharma, defensive lineman from Folsom, California, a big physical guy. And then another kid from California, Jordan Davison, running back out of Mater Dei, a big physical running back. I think, the way that they've recruited the West Coast is pretty selective right now. These were 2 guys they clearly really liked, and Davison's a player who, with his size and physicality, could really fit maybe in the Big Ten with what you're kind of trying to attract from a running back perspective. And then a day later, more fireworks, I guess early before 4th of July this time. But Desam Brame, a tight end out of Derby, Kansas, this was a kid that they coveted this cycle. They needed to find a tight end. Their top 2 tight ends are leaving after this season. This was a priority target. They got it done. They had a lot of competition here. I know Tennessee at one point felt really good about things. That was big. And then Dorian Brew kind of shocked us all. I'll be honest. I don't think any of us over at Duck Territory expected he would commit when he did. And picking him up, a composite 5-star, a player with a ton of national attention, again, coming from the state of Texas, this kind of got the ball rolling and kind of the momentum. And then obviously to finish it with Dakorien Moore this last week was really big.
Erik, who are some other names down the stretch that we can pay attention to if you're a Ducks fan and Dan Lanning and his staff try to close?
Yeah, I think we go back to that June 21st visit date, and there were 4 other 5-star recruits on campus: cornerback DJ Pickett, defensive back Terry McNutt, Jonah Williams. I don't know, what do we call him? Is he a defensive back? Is he a linebacker? An athlete maybe? And then 5-star athlete Michael Terry. Those 4 are big time targets. They're guys Oregon feels like they're in a decent spot for. There's definitely some kind of rumblings that maybe this can go Oregon's way for several of these guys. And look, Oregon has never signed more than 3 5-stars in a cycle. Right now, they've already reached that number with the guys we've already talked about. Wouldn't be a surprise if they surpass that number, and maybe by quite a bit. I'd also point to some offensive linemen that they hosted in June 21st. You know, they kind of need to fill up in the trenches here. Maybe not as high profile names, but Juan Gaston, Aaron Dunn, and Alai Kalanavaiolu are 3 that they hosted that weekend as well. These are important pieces. You know, they've already got a couple of 4-star commitments in the offensive line with Zaire Addison and Dimitri Manning, but they kind of need to fill out. And Erik Terry, the offensive line coach, has done such a good job, I think, since arriving a year ago of finding the pieces and putting it together. I think they want to try to take 4 or 5, maybe 6 guys a year. They only have 2 right now, and those are 3 names definitely to watch as Oregon tries to kind of round out this class.
All right, if Oregon gets some more commitments from some of those guys, we know, Erik, you will be all over it. Thanks for joining our show today. We appreciate it. You can read more of his work at duckterritory.com. That's where you go for all things Oregon as they make the move to the Big Ten. They are the one-stop shop for everything you need to know ahead of this season.